The village of Ijesa was a small, dusty settlement tucked between rolling hills and a winding river. Its red soil, sun-baked streets, and clusters of mud brick houses gave it a familiar warmth. Yet there was a sense of unease that no festival or song could erase. The village had long been promised development, a proper school, clean water, paved roads, and reliable electricity. But year after year, the promises remained just that, promises. Children played barefoot along the streets, kicking tattered footballs, while women carried baskets of tomatoes and cassava on their heads, singing as they walked. Men sat under mango trees, fanning themselves and discussing everything from farming techniques to local gossip. Yet the topic on everyone's mind, Chief Balogun's continued neglect, hung like a heavy cloud. Amari, a bright 12-year-old boy with wide, curious eyes, noticed things differently. While other children spent their afternoons playing, Amari roamed the village streets, asking questions and observing details that adults seemed to ignore. "Why is the school roof still leaking?" he asked one afternoon as he passed the old building with his friend Kojo. The roof sagged, with gaps patched by old cloth and plastic sheets. Water dripped into the classrooms whenever it rained. "Don't bother, Amari," Kojo replied with a shrug. "That's Chief Balogun's problem, not ours." "But someone collects the money, Kojo. Where does it go? Why is nothing fixed?" Amari asked, his brow furrowed. Kojo shook his head and ran off, leaving Amari staring at the crumbling structure. His mind raced. He had heard the elders mutter about missing funds, bribery, and threats, but no one dared speak openly. Fear of Chief Balogun's power kept them silent, and most adults had accepted the corruption as inevitable. Later that day, as Amari wandered past the market, he overheard two men whispering near a row of vegetable stalls. "The school money, the road contract, it's all gone," one man muttered nervously. "Careful, don't let the chief hear," the other warned. Amari, hiding behind a basket of yams, strained to hear. His heart pounded. Words like diverted, bribe, and secret accounts sent a chill down his spine. For the first time, he realized that corruption wasn't just a rumor. It was real, and no adult dared challenge it. That evening, as he lay under the mosquito net in his small room, Amari thought about what he had seen. He knew the village needed someone to stand up, to shine light on the truth. The adults had allowed fear to dominate justice, but he could not. He had to do something, even if he was only a boy. He pulled out a small notebook and began scribbling his observations: the leaking school, the dried-up well, the potholes that turned roads into mud traps after rain. He made note of the men he overheard, their gestures, and their words. Everything could be evidence if he paid attention. Before sleep claimed him, Amari whispered to himself, "If nobody else will stand for the village, I will. Even if I am just a boy, I will make them see the truth." The night was quiet. Yet in that stillness, a spark of determination lit within Amari. The journey ahead would be dangerous. Chief Balogun was powerful, feared, and cunning. But Amari's resolve was firm. He would find the proof, and he would expose the corruption. The boy who refused to stay silent had been born. The next morning, the sun rose over Ijesa, casting golden light across the dusty streets. Amari woke early, his mind racing with plans. He could not ignore what he had overheard the previous day. Chief Balogun's corruption was no longer just a rumor. It was real, and it was harming his village. Amari began by observing the village closely. He walked past the school again, noting the roof that leaked in the classrooms and the holes in the walls. Children balanced books on their heads to keep them dry whenever. The seed of courage planted in Amari grew stronger. He knew the path ahead would be filled with risk, but he had discovered the truth, and with the truth, he had power. The days following Amari's discovery were filled with careful planning. He knew that to confront Chief Balogun, he needed solid proof, something undeniable, something that could not be dismissed as rumor or childish imagination. He was just a boy, but he had courage, intelligence, and an observant mind. That, he realized, could be more powerful than fear. Each morning, Amari would wake before sunrise, slipping quietly out of his small room to avoid drawing attention. He carried a small satchel filled with a notebook, a pencil, and a few scraps of paper for notes. Every step was deliberate, every glance calculated. The villagers had grown used to his wandering, assuming he was simply a curious boy, but they did not know he was collecting the truth. Amari began visiting the workers who had been cheated out of wages or materials. Some were too afraid to speak, glancing over their shoulders as they whispered. "Be careful, boy," one elderly carpenter warned. "Chief Balogun does not forget. People disappear, get their homes burned, or worse, for speaking against him." Amari nodded solemnly. "I understand," he said quietly, "but your truth matters. I will keep it safe. The village needs to know." One by one, the villagers who trusted him told their stories, receipts for materials that never reached the school, canceled checks, and notes from the chief's assistants. Everything was carefully hidden in Amari's small satchel. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture. Money meant for the village had been diverted to enrich the chief and his friends. But Amari didn't stop there. He observed the chief's compound from behind trees, fences, and abandoned huts. He noted the arrivals of trucks loaded with supplies that never made it to the village projects. He jotted down the license plates, descriptions of vehicles, and names of the drivers. At night, under the faint light of a lantern, he meticulously organized his notes, drawing diagrams and connecting events. One afternoon, while hiding behind a mango tree near the chief's office, Amari overheard a conversation that made his heart race. Two of the chief's assistants were arguing over missing funds. "If anyone finds out about this, we're finished," one said, his voice low but frantic. Amari's hands shook as he quickly sketched the scene in his notebook. This was the smoking gun, a conversation revealing both intent and wrongdoing. He had to keep it safe, so he memorized every word and hid the notes in a hollow behind the market wall. He also learned to be discreet with the villagers. Some could help by providing details, but many were too afraid to risk speaking openly. Amari developed a secret code with a few trusted friends, passing messages hidden in everyday chores: a basket of yams, a folded wrapper, a carved stick. Each piece of information strengthened his growing dossier against Chief Balogun. Every night, as he lay under his mosquito net, Amari felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He was small, vulnerable, and alone in his mission. But he also felt the fire of purpose burning inside him. The villagers deserved justice. They deserved to see the truth. "I may be just a boy," he whispered to the darkness, "but I will make them see. I will gather the proof, and I will not be silenced. Chief Balogun cannot hide forever." And so, armed with courage, intelligence, and the determination of a boy who refused to accept injustice, Amari continued to gather proof. Each day brought him closer to the truth, and closer to the moment when the corrupt politician would finally face the consequences of his actions. Amari's success in gathering evidence did not go unnoticed. Word of a clever, inquisitive boy asking questions, scribbling in secret, and lingering near the chief's compound reached the ears of Chief Balogun. He was a man who valued control above all else, and the idea that a child might be uncovering his schemes ignited a dangerous mix of fear and anger. One afternoon, Amari returned from the market with a few hidden receipts from a worker who had been underpaid. As he rounded a corner near the village square, two burly men in plain clothes stepped from the shadows. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp. "You're a curious boy," one said, his tone low and menacing. "Curiosity can be dangerous." Amari's heart skipped a beat, but he stood tall. "I'm just a boy," he said cautiously, "who wants to know the truth." The man laughed, a hollow, unpleasant sound. "Truth? That can get you into trouble. Watch your steps, boy. Chief Balogun doesn't like people prying into his business." Amari nodded, hiding the fear rising in his chest. He had expected resistance, but a direct warning from the chief's men was a new threat. They left, blending into the bustling market, but Amari knew this was only the beginning. That evening, the village buzzed with whispers. Elders gathered under the large mango tree, speaking in hushed tones about the boy and the chief. Many feared for their own safety and avoided Amari, warning him to stay silent. "Amari," one elder said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you must be careful. The chief is dangerous. You may think you are small and clever, but even clever boys can disappear if they anger powerful men." "I understand," Amari replied, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "But I cannot stop. If I do, the village will never see the truth." That night, he hid his notebook and receipts in a secret compartment beneath a loose floorboard in his room. Every word, every scrap of evidence, was precious. He knew the chief would attempt to intercept or destroy it if he suspected the boy's actions. Over the next few days, Amari noticed unusual activity near his home. Men lingered on the outskirts of the village, watching the streets. He overheard servants whispering to each other that the chief had ordered surveillance on anyone who seemed too curious. The warning was clear: stop or face consequences. Despite the danger, Amari refused to yield. He began taking precautions, moving notes, memorizing details instead of writing them, and using clever disguises to observe meetings. His friends were briefed to act normal, never drawing attention to him. Amari also began speaking quietly to trusted villagers, urging them to document what they had seen: secret payments, incomplete contracts, and missing funds. Many were too afraid, but a few brave souls agreed to help anonymously, leaving notes in hidden spots around the village. Late one night, Amari sat under the stars, his satchel open before him. The weight of fear pressed against him like a stone, but he refused to let it win. "I may be small," he whispered to the darkness, "but courage is not measured by size. I will see this through. The chief may threaten, but he cannot stop the truth." In the silence of his room, he made a vow. He would continue gathering proof, no matter the danger. Chief Balogun could send men, whisper threats, or intimidate the villagers, but Amari's determination was stronger than fear. The boy who refused to stay silent would not back down. The village's future depended on it. Amari knew that gathering proof was only the first step. The hardest part lay ahead: ensuring the evidence reached people who could act. His small satchel contained receipts, scribbled notes, sketches, and even eyewitness accounts, a compelling story of corruption. But if he stayed in the village, Chief Balogun's spies could intercept it all. He needed help, and he needed to move carefully. Early one morning, Amari made his way to the bus station at the edge of the village. His heart pounded like a drum as he clutched the satchel close to his chest. He had memorized the route to the town where a trustworthy journalist worked, someone known for investigating corruption. Every step felt heavy, yet each carried purpose. "Be careful, Amari," whispered an elder who had quietly agreed to assist him. "The chief will not hesitate to punish anyone who exposes him." "I will be careful," Amari promised, bowing respectfully. But the village must know the truth. The journey to the nearby town was long and dusty. The bus rattled along pothole-filled roads, kicking up clouds of red soil. Amari kept his eyes focused outside the window, avoiding the attention of other passengers who were engrossed in their own business. He rehearsed what he would say to the journalist, how he would hand over the evidence, and how he would explain the situation without revealing names unnecessarily. Upon arrival, the town was a whirlwind of activity: vendors selling plantains and yams, women carrying baskets on their heads, children running between stalls, and motorbikes darting through the narrow streets. Amari carefully made his way to the modest office of the journalist, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Adana, known for exposing corruption in nearby towns. "Please, I need to speak with you," Amari said, his voice small but firm as he handed her the satchel. Mrs. Adana raised an eyebrow, surprised to see a boy of 12 standing before her with such determination. "What is this?" she asked, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. "It's proof," Amari said, "proof that Chief Balogun has been stealing the village's money for the school, the roads, and other projects. People are afraid to speak, but I have everything recorded here." Mrs. Adana opened the satchel carefully, examining the notes, receipts, and sketches. She frowned, flipping through page after page. "This is detailed," Where did you get all of this? I observed, Amari explained. I talked to workers and villagers who were cheated. I memorized conversations. I know it's dangerous, but the village deserves justice. Mrs. Adana's eyes softened as she studied him. You're brave, Amari. Many adults would have stayed silent. You're putting yourself at great risk to do the right thing. Amari nodded. I had to. If no one acts, the village will never be free from his corruption. Mrs. Adana made a quick phone call, setting up a meeting with a government anti-corruption office. She assured Amari that he would remain protected and that the information would be investigated thoroughly. The boy's heart raced with hope and fear, hope that the truth would finally be revealed, and fear of what might happen if the chief discovered that Amari had gone to the town. Returning to Ijesa, Amari kept a low profile. He told no one where he had gone, fearing that even a whisper might reach Chief Balogun. Yet despite the tension, a new feeling surged within him: empowerment. The boy who had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated had become the bearer of truth. That night, under the soft glow of a lantern, Amari whispered to himself, I have done what I could. Now the truth will take its course. The chief cannot hide forever. And so, Amari waited, patient, vigilant, and unafraid, knowing that the courage of a single boy might be enough to change the fate of an entire village. The following week, the village of Ijesa buzzed with a tense mixture of curiosity and fear. Rumors had begun to circulate that Chief Balogun was under investigation. Though no official word had reached the village yet, whispers of auditors and journalists asking questions set the adults on edge. Some clutched their receipts and contracts, unsure if speaking the truth would save them or put them in danger. Amari watched from a distance, heart pounding. He had delivered the evidence, and now it was out of his hands, but he knew the real battle had just begun. He couldn't ignore what might happen next. The chief would not step down quietly, and witnesses might be threatened or bribed. True to Amari's expectations, Chief Balogun reacted swiftly. He called a private meeting with his assistants, his face dark with fury. Someone is trying to ruin me, he growled. I want every witness intimidated. Make it clear, anyone who talks will regret it, and find out who that boy is. The chief's henchmen scoured the village, questioning villagers subtly, offering bribes, and even issuing threats. Careful what you say, one whispered to an old carpenter, or your workshop may mysteriously burn down. You know how powerful the chief can be. Amari remained cautious. He avoided his usual routes, changed the times he visited the market, and kept most of his notes memorized rather than written. He also warned the few villagers who had helped him to remain silent until the authorities could confirm protection. Meanwhile, Mrs. Adana, the journalist, coordinated with government auditors and anti-corruption officials. Documents were cross-checked, interviews conducted, and bank records examined. Slowly, the web of corruption began to unravel. Receipts that Chief Balogun's assistants had dismissed as irrelevant now formed a clear pattern. Money meant for school repairs, road construction, and water projects had been diverted into secret accounts. One evening, Amari met with a small group of villagers in secret. They huddled under the mango tree near the market, speaking in whispers. We can't hide anymore, an elderly man said, his hands trembling. The auditors are asking for testimony. They need to know what really happened. Amari nodded. I know. That's why I've memorized everything. The conversations, the deliveries, the missing funds. We can help, but we must stay safe. Don't speak to anyone until the officials are here. The tension in the village grew. Some were terrified, imagining what Chief Balogun might do if he discovered their cooperation. Others, inspired by Amari's bravery, resolved to stand firm. The boy's courage had ignited a quiet rebellion. The villagers realized that corruption could be challenged if they acted together. One afternoon, Amari observed a meeting at the chief's compound. From behind the bushes, he saw the chief pacing angrily, slamming his fists on the table. The auditors are here because of a child, he shouted. How dare he? Amari clenched his fists in determination. The chief could threaten and bribe, but the truth was unstoppable now. Every document, Every witness and every careful observation had built a fortress that even fear could not break. That night, Amari lay under the mosquito net, listening to the distant hum of the village. He felt the weight of what he had done, but also a sense of pride. He had sparked a chain of events that could restore justice to his community. He whispered to himself, "The chief may fight, but the truth is stronger. I will stand for the village, no matter what comes." And so, the investigation began in earnest, with Amari's courage at the center. The boy who had once been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated had become the spark of justice for the entire village. The day the news finally broke, the village of Ijesa seemed to hold its breath. Word spread quickly. Chief Balogun, the man whose promises had long kept the villagers hopeful yet trapped in despair, was under arrest. The journalists, auditors, and government officials had verified the evidence Amari had collected. Every diverted fund, every incomplete project, every whispered bribe had been confirmed. At first, many villagers refused to believe it. Chief Balogun had been untouchable for years, feared by adults and children alike. How could a mere boy expose such a powerful man? But soon, the truth could no longer be denied. The village square filled with murmurs of shock, disbelief, and for some, cautious hope. Amari, hiding behind a mango tree with Kojo and a few friends, watched the commotion with wide eyes. Children ran around, pointing at police vehicles, while adults whispered anxiously among themselves. Some shook their heads, muttering, "If a child could do this, what have we been afraid of all these years?" The first to react publicly was an elderly woman, Mama Sunke, who had been a quiet voice in the village for decades. She stepped forward, raising her voice so the nearby crowd could hear. "Justice has finally come. At last, someone has dared to stand for what is right." The crowd murmured in agreement, some nodding, others wiping tears. Meanwhile, Chief Balogun was led through the village square in handcuffs, his usual arrogance replaced by a mixture of anger and humiliation. He glared at the villagers, but no one flinched. The fear that had once gripped Ijesa had lifted. For the first time, the community realized that even the most powerful man could be held accountable. Journalists recorded the scene, asking villagers for statements. Amari remained hidden, but several adults quietly credited him for the exposure. One local shopkeeper whispered to a reporter, "It was the boy, Amari. He saw the truth when the rest of us were too afraid." As Chief Balogun was taken away, some villagers celebrated cautiously, while others were reflective, realizing how much courage had been required. Amari's bravery had inspired not just the villagers of Ijesa, but the entire region. His careful observation, his determination, and his refusal to be silenced had changed the course of the village's history. Even in the aftermath, the chief tried to save face, shouting accusations of falsehoods and conspiracy. But the documentation was overwhelming. The receipts, the testimonies, and the notes that Amari had so meticulously gathered formed an unbreakable chain of evidence. His reputation, once unchallenged, was now in ruins. By nightfall, the village gathered under the large mango tree near the market. Families, neighbors, and children celebrated quietly, knowing that the work was far from over, but that justice had taken a significant step forward. Amari, sitting with Kojo, finally allowed himself to relax. The fear that had gripped him for weeks now gave way to relief and pride. One elder, placing a hand on his shoulder, said softly, "You've shown us that courage comes in all sizes, Amari. You've taught the village a lesson no adult could have taught alone." Amari smiled, glancing around at his community. The road ahead would still require effort to rebuild what Chief Balogun had destroyed, but for the first time in years, Ijesa had hope. The boy who had once been ignored and underestimated had become a symbol of truth and justice, and his actions would be remembered for generations. That night, as the village settled into an unusual quiet, Amari whispered to himself, "The chief has been exposed. The village is safe, at least for now. But courage will always be needed. I will be ready." The village of Ijesa woke to a new day, one filled with a quiet but powerful sense of possibility. Chief Balogun's arrest had sent ripples through the community, and the people were no longer bound by fear. The news of Amari's courage spread far beyond the village, inspiring nearby towns and even reaching state officials. For the first time in years, the villagers could imagine a future where justice and honesty mattered more than intimidation and deceit. Rebuilding the village was no easy task. Roads that had turned to mud in the rainy season were repaired with proper materials. The school roof was fixed, and the water well was cleaned and reinforced. Government officials visited regularly, ensuring that funds now reached their intended purposes. But amidst all this rebuilding, one figure stood out: Amari, the boy who had dared to challenge the powerful. Children ran past him playing football as he walked through the market, and adults nodded with gratitude when he passed by. Some quietly whispered, "It was him." Amari saw the truth when the rest of us were too afraid. Even elders who had once dismissed him as a curious child now looked upon him with pride and respect. Amari, however, remained humble. He knew that while he had sparked the change, it was the collective courage of the villagers, their willingness to provide testimony and stand firm, that had truly brought justice. Still, he could not deny the satisfaction of seeing his village thrive after years of neglect. One afternoon, the villagers gathered under the large mango tree near the market for a ceremony of appreciation. Officials, journalists, and community leaders came to honor those who had helped restore the village. Amari, standing beside Kojo, felt nervous as the village chief of ceremonies approached. "Today, we honor a young boy," the elder announced, his voice carrying across the square. "A boy whose courage and determination reminded us that even the smallest among us can change the world. Amari, you have shown that justice knows no age and truth knows no fear." The villagers erupted into applause. Some clapped, others waved handkerchiefs, and children cheered loudly, calling Amari a hero. His heart swelled with pride, but he remained modest. "I only did what I knew was right," he whispered to Kojo, who grinned back. Over the next few weeks, life in Ijesa began to normalize, yet with an air of hope and vigilance. Meetings were held to ensure community funds were properly managed, and villagers volunteered to oversee projects. Amari helped by offering advice on documentation and accountability, inspiring other children to be observant and responsible. At night, as he lay beneath the mosquito net in his small room, Amari reflected on how far the village had come. From the fear and corruption that had dominated every corner, Ijesa was transforming into a place where honesty mattered, where the voices of the people, even a young boy, could challenge injustice. He whispered to the darkness, "Courage can start small, but it can grow to change everything. I will always stand for what is right. I will protect my village, no matter what comes." Amari's story became a legend, passed down from parents to children. They spoke of the boy who had seen the truth, who had risked everything to expose a corrupt politician, and who had shown that bravery is not measured by age or size. And so the village of Ijesa was reborn, stronger, wiser, and united. Roads were mended, children learned in safe classrooms, and the water flowed once more. But more importantly, the people learned a lesson that no building or road could teach: that courage, honesty, and determination can overcome fear, and that even one person, no matter how small, can spark lasting change. Amari looked out over the village from the edge of the riverbank, the sun setting behind the hills, and smiled. His journey was far from over, but the village had been given a new beginning, and for the first time, he felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that